A stranger walks in, wearing flats and a simple trench coat, and it changes everything. Who gets to decide who's important? Let us know in the comments section below. Paulina Keaton didn't dress for war. She didn't have to. Her confidence didn't need armor, or designer labels, or the kind of glossy theatrics the auction house staff seemed to expect. They didn't see her, not really. And that was their first mistake. She walked with purpose, low heels tapping against marble tile, a leather tote snug under her arm, and approached the front desk like she'd done it 100 times before. But this wasn't familiarity, it was focus. The woman at reception barely looked up. Mid-50s, ash blonde, thin lips pursed in perpetual judgment. Her name tag read, Margot. Her eyes flicked toward Paulina's clothes, lingered on the absence of a watch or an assistant trailing behind her, then returned to her screen. Paulina smiled anyway. "Hi," she said, tone warm but even. "I'm here for the subtly African collection auction." Margot's voice was clipped, almost bored. "Are you on the list?" "I RSVP'd online." "You'll need to be escorted. This auction is for VIP clients only. Invitation only," she added, as if Paulina didn't understand English the first time. Paulina tilted her head slightly. "I understand. Could you check the list anyway?" Margot sighed, her long nails clicking over the keyboard. After a few seconds, she looked up, just long enough to confirm what she already believed. "You're not on it." Paulina's smile remained steady. "I'm happy to wait for a manager." "There's no need," Margot said, already returning her gaze to the screen. "You can take a brochure if you'd like to learn more about upcoming events." There it was. The brush-off, polished, practiced, dismissal served on a sterling silver tray. Paulina gave a slight nod. Understood. She turned, walked toward the tall glass doors, then paused, just long enough to let the wind of her silence fill the space behind her. She didn't look back. Outside, she took out her phone. One tap, then a second. The call connected, and her voice, still calm, carried the edge of quiet precision. "Yes, it's me. Initiate the transfer. Full acquisition including staff contracts. I want the board notified before the last item is sold." She ended the call before the other voice could respond. Because she wasn't new to this. 15 years ago, she'd walked into an estate sale in Oakland with $42 in her checking account and walked out with a rusted iron sculpture no one else saw value in. Now that same piece sat behind bulletproof glass at the National African Art Museum in D.C., appraised at over $2 million, 0 cents. Her journey hadn't been glamorous. It had been real. Grit, research, long nights on the floor with spreadsheets and coffee-stained books. Art wasn't just beauty. It was history. It was blood. For her, it was family. And Paulina's family didn't come from wealth. They came from pain and pride, struggle and triumph, and a grandmother named Claudette, who had hands like bark and stories that lived in her bones. "Don't you ever let them tell you what's worth something," Grandma Claudette had said once, her hands wrapping a worn quilt around a small wooden stool carved in Ghana. "They only know the price. You know the meaning." That stool still sat in Paulina's foyer. Back inside the auction house, Margot leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the counter. A man in a navy suit, balding, slight gut, expensive watch, approached the desk. "Richard Langley, here for the auction." Margot lit up like Times Square. "Oh, of course, Mr. Langley. Welcome back. We've reserved your usual seat in the front row." Langley offered a lazy smile, sliding his sunglasses into his pocket. "Any buzz yet on Lot 27? "None so far, but we expect a fight over it. It's rare." Langley watched from outside as Langley disappeared through a door she had been denied. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass. Calm, rooted, unmoved. She didn't need to get in. She already was. She turned, walking down the block, past boutique cafes and flower stands, until she reached a black SUV idling quietly at the curb. The back door opened as she approached, and a woman inside nodded without speaking. "Do you have the documents?" Paulina asked, sliding in. The woman handed her a folder. "Everything's ready. As of noon today, the holding company owns 51%. Paulina didn't smile. Not yet. She flipped through the pages, scanning names, terms, employee retention clauses, art preservation agreements. "I want the curator of the African collection promoted immediately. Full benefits. And a public announcement by next week. Press release, interviews, the whole thing." The woman scribbled notes. "Understood." Paulina handed the folder back and leaned her head against the cool glass of the car window. Her eyes drifted upward, toward the auction house's stone archway, its manicured hedges, and behind them, the people who thought they knew what power looked like. She didn't care about their rooms or their rules. She'd bought the building, and this was just the opening act. Paulina hadn't been back to Oakland in nearly 2 years, but her footsteps knew the way. The sidewalk outside her grandmother's old home was cracked now, lined with weeds pushing through years of neglect, but each fracture still whispered memory. She paused at the gate, not because she hesitated, but because this place deserved respect. Even empty, it was sacred ground. Inside, the air was thick with dust and sunlight filtering through faded curtains. The old quilt was still there, draped over the back of the recliner like it had been waiting. And for a second, just a second, Paulina let herself feel small again. She sank into the chair and pulled out the envelope she'd kept tucked in her coat pocket all morning. It was thick, hand-drawn, the paper weighty and cream-colored, embossed with the gold seal of the auction house. She'd asked the assistant to mail it weeks ago, even before the acquisition was finalized. Inside was an invitation. "In recognition of your ongoing contributions to the preservation of African diaspora art, we are honored to invite you as a keynote guest to the Subtly African Collection Gala and Auction." It was addressed to Paulina Keaton. Paulina traced the lettering with her thumb. Grandma never got invited into rooms like that. But her legacy? Her legacy was about to sit at the head of the table. She looked around the room and exhaled. The peeling wallpaper, the broken lamp in the corner, the stack of church fans beside the fireplace. Nothing in this place was expensive, but everything in it was rich. Her phone buzzed. She didn't need to look at it to know who it was. Andre. He was always checking in, always one step behind her, like a quiet shadow. He'd been her right hand since grad school, back when she'd been cataloging black artists from the Harlem Renaissance in a dingy library, and he'd been sleeping on her couch between job interviews. And she answered without speaking. "You good?" His voice came low through the line. "Yeah, just home." He paused. "Want me to meet you?" "No," she said. "I need this moment alone." "Copy that. Just say the word." He hung up without waiting for a goodbye. That was their way. She stayed in the house until the sun dipped past the rusted gutters and shadows stretched long across the carpet. Then she rose, brushed off her coat, and made her way to the back room, the one her grandmother always kept locked when company came over. The key still hung behind the pantry door, right where it always had. Inside, it was cooler, the air thicker, and the smell earthy, old wood, oil paint, a whisper of incense. This was her grandmother's private gallery. Floor to ceiling, the room was packed with relics, masks carved from ancient trees, beaded headdresses, iron sculptures, woven cloths. Some faded, some flawless, but every piece was loved. Paulina ran her fingers along a sculpture shaped like an elongated face, the forehead high, the eyes deep set, the jaw proud. She didn't know the tribe, didn't know the artist, didn't even know how it came into her family's hands. But she knew it. This wasn't decor. This was survival. For years, Grandma Claudette had collected what the world overlooked. She never called herself a curator. She called herself a keeper. And now Paulina was the last keeper left. She picked up her camera and began cataloging, one piece at a time, her voice low as she recorded each entry into her archive. Object: 104. Wooden figure, East African origin, likely. Estimated 19th century, damage to base, history unknown. Retained by C. Keaton, 1976. Each entry felt like a benediction, and as the room darkened, her grandmother's voice echoed faint in her memory, strong as gospel. They only know the price. You know the meaning. Paulina left the house close to midnight. She locked the door behind her like she always had, twice to the left, then back to the right, and walked the 2 blocks to where she'd parked her rental. A group of teens passed her on the corner, loud and half laughing. One boy looked back, eyes narrowed. "Hey, you Miss Keaton." She turned, eyebrows raised. "My aunt says you're the one who bought that art building in the city, the fancy one. That true?" Paulina smiled. "It is." "Damn," he said. "That's cold. Like, boss moves. She said they didn't even know who you were." "That's how it goes sometimes," she replied. The boy grinned. "You gonna let people like us in?" She didn't hesitate. "Not just in," she said. "I'm making room for y'all to take over." The boy let out a low whistle, nodding as he walked away, head held a little higher than before. Paulina stood still a moment longer, watching the sidewalk. The streetlight flickering overhead, the smell of jasmine and fried food lingering in the night. The world was still turning, but it felt different now. As she arrived back at her hotel suite in San Francisco, she didn't sleep. She opened her laptop, began typing out the proposal she'd been drafting in her head since the first call went through. A program for young curators, scholarships, artist residencies, gallery space prioritized for work from the diaspora. Her fingers moved fast, her mind faster. The name at the top of the document read, "The Claudette Keaton Foundation for Cultural Legacy and Art Preservation." The auction was tomorrow, but the real work? That had already begun. The doors opened at exactly 6:00 p.m. sharp. People poured into the main hall of Sudley & Co., in pressed suits and designer heels, their laughter bouncing off the marble and gold as waiters weaved through the crowd with crystal flutes of champagne. The chandeliers sparkled with the same self-importance that filled the room, each crystal a reminder that this place had never been meant for everyone. This was legacy wrapped in linen napkins, power sealed in gavel strikes. The rare African artifact collection sat on lit pedestals under glass, guarded like secrets. Lot 27, a bronze ceremonial mask from the Benin Kingdom, sat at the center like a crown jewel. Appraised at nearly $3 million, 0 cents, it drew hushed awe from every bidder who passed it, though none of them knew its story. Paulina stood just outside the main gallery, still and unreadable, watching. She wasn't wearing designer, no stylist had touched her makeup, but her presence bent the energy in the room. Not because they recognized her, not yet, but because something about her didn't flinch, didn't seek approval. In a space full of noise, she was silence, and silence demands attention. She stepped inside. Margot was at the reception desk again, clipboard in hand, reciting names and checking RSVPs with polished efficiency. She caught sight of Paulina entering the room and stiffened. Her eyes narrowed, then darted toward a young man in a navy suit standing by the wall. "Ed, sir," Margot whispered. The young man looked up, confused. "Who?" "The woman from earlier. Said she RSVP'd online. Not on the list." He glanced at Paulina, took in her simple dress, the way she walked like she owned the building. Then he frowned. "I thought you turned her away." "I did," Margot snapped. "But she's back." Volungulate. He stepped away from the wall, fixing his blazer, rehearsing what he'd say. But as he moved toward her, something strange happened. To themselves, she didn't stop walking. He opened his mouth to speak, but then a buzz erupted across the room. A short, neatly dressed man in tortoiseshell glasses rushed up to the microphone at the front of the gallery. His voice rang out, "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us at the Softly African Collection Auction Gala. Before we begin tonight's bidding, we have a special announcement from the Board of Trustees." The room shifted. Phones slid into pockets. Conversations paused. Paulina stopped, standing dead center now, under the soft glow of a halo-like spotlight. The man continued, "As of this morning, a majority share of Southerly & Co. has been acquired by a private holding group. Effective immediately, our board welcomes its new chair, Paulina Keaton." Silence. Then, gasps. Audible, unfiltered, human. Paulina stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "I came here today not to bid," she said, "but to reclaim." She let the sentence breathe. For too long, the legacy of African art has been removed from African hands, sold, mislabeled, stripped of context and reverence. That ends tonight. In the back, someone dropped their champagne glass. "I'm not here to burn this place down," she continued. "I'm here to rebuild it, starting with the truth, starting with the people who made these works, who bled for them, who carried them across oceans and generations, who were never invited to the rooms where their ancestors were sold to the highest bidder." People shifted uncomfortably. "I have renamed this house," Paulina said. "It will now be known as the Keaton Institute for Cultural Art and Equity." A man in a velvet tux turned to the woman beside him. "Is this for real?" Paulina turned her eyes to him, as if she heard, as if she knew. "Yes," she said directly. "This is real." Someone clapped, hesitantly. Then another joined in, and another. Not everyone clapped. Some turned to leave, others glared, but a few, those who got it, those who had waited their whole lives to see this moment, they stood up, hands raw from applause, eyes burning. Persipiano, Paulina waited, let it settle. Then she gave one last sentence. "We will now proceed with the auction, but understand this. Everything you buy tonight you do in the presence of its rightful history." She stepped away from the microphone. No fanfare, no music, just power, the kind you can't fake. Back at the reception desk, Margot stared like she'd seen a ghost. The young man next to her whispered, "She bought us." Margot said nothing. Inside the gallery, bidding resumed. But it wasn't the same. The air was different, heavier, honest. Lot 5 sold for $80,000, 0 cents. Lot 12 sparked a bidding war between two collectors, both of whom glanced nervously at Paulina before raising their paddles. When Lot 27 approached, the tension hit its peak. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Lot 27, ceremonial bronze mask, Benin Kingdom, provenance traced, restoration complete. Starting bid, $1,500,000, 0 cents. Slants. Paulina remained seated. She didn't move. A voice called out from the back. $2 million. Another followed. 2.3. 2.7, came a third, almost desperate. 3.5, a woman near the front said, trembling as she raised her paddle. The room gasped. The auctioneer nodded. 3.5 million, going once. Ash. Paulina raised a hand. "Correction," the auctioneer stammered. "Miss Keaton bids She didn't name a number. She simply said, "This piece is not for sale." He froze. Miss Keaton now owns the house, and this piece was never meant to be traded. Gasps again. The woman with the paddle lowered it, her lips parting, unsure if she should be offended or relieved. Paulina stood. "This artifact is being returned," she said, "to the National Commission for Museums and Monuments in Nigeria, where it belongs." Somewhere in the gallery, a black woman began to cry. This was not the auction they expected, but it was the one history needed. The boardroom on the top floor of the newly renamed Keaton Institute had once been a place where decisions were made in silence, over cigars and investment portfolios, behind closed doors. Now, the doors were open. The scent of sage drifted faintly from a small carved bowl in the corner. The wall where portraits of founding donors once hung now featured large framed prints of black artists from the diaspora, some famous, others just beginning. Paulina stood at the head of the long table, watching the city through the window. The skyline reflected in the glass, the tower lights blinking slow like heartbeats. Behind her, the room buzzed with soft voices, murmurs of anticipation. The new advisory board took their seats. Art historians from HBCUs, curators from grassroots galleries, 2 teenage students from Oakland who'd been nominated through the Foundation's new Youth Fellowship program. Nobody wore a suit unless they wanted to. Nobody had to apologize for existing. Paulina turned around, her face calm but warm. "I won't keep y'all long," she began, "but I wanted to say this in person." Every head turned toward her. This building used to be a gate. It kept people out, people who didn't dress right, talk right, look right. She paused, remembering the way Margot's voice sounded when she said, "VIP only." Paulina continued, "But gates swing both ways, and today it opens." The applause wasn't loud. It was honest, real. She looked at the 2 students. Jaden, who painted every inch of his backpack in tribute to Afrofuturism, and Tasha, who once got suspended for organizing a protest after her school cut its arts funding. "This space is yours now too," Paulina said, nodding toward them. "Not just to visit, to shape, to question, to challenge." They both nodded, wide-eyed, barely believing it. Across the table, Dr. June Ellis, an elder scholar whose work had been ignored by institutions for decades, leaned forward. "I never thought I'd live to see a day where we weren't just tokens on the brochure," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Paulina smiled. "You were never a token. They just didn't know how to read you." After the meeting, people lingered. No one rushed out. The interns passed around small dishes of jollof rice and ginger tea as old friends reunited and new collaborators met. Paulina walked slowly through the space, pausing at every conversation, every exchange. Andre appeared beside her like he always did. "You really did it," he said. "No," she said. "We did." He nodded. "That too. But I mean you, Paulina. This wasn't just business. This was personal." She gave him a soft look, half grateful, half tired. "Everything worth doing is personal." They walked to her office, a space that still felt too polished. She hadn't had time to make it hers yet. But the sculpture from her grandmother's house, the one with a proud jaw and deep eyes, sat on her desk. It anchored everything. Andre sat across from her, leaning back in the chair like he always had when they were broke and dreaming. "So what's next?" he asked. Paulina exhaled slowly, eyes drifting toward the sculpture. "We give back what was stolen. We uplift what was silenced. And we never forget who taught us how to see beauty in the cracks." He smirked. "You gonna write that on a wall somewhere?" She laughed. "Might." That weekend, the Institute hosted its first open house. They didn't charge a fee, they didn't check your shoes. Families poured in. Black, brown, immigrant, queer, old, young. Some came to learn. Some came to see if it was true. Some came just to stand in a place that finally felt like theirs. In the middle of the main hall stood a display titled "The Keepers." A single spotlight shone on the carved wooden stool from Paulina's childhood home. Next to it, a photo of Paulina Keaton, her hands folded neatly in her lap, a steady gaze behind her glasses. No plaque listed her credentials. The caption beneath the photo read, "She taught us that knowing where you're from is the first step to knowing where you're going." Paulina stood by the display for a long time that day. Not giving a speech, not taking photos. Just be. A young girl, maybe 8 or 9, walked up beside her, holding her father's hand. Her hair was braided with beads that clicked softly as she moved. She stared at the stool like it held secrets. "Is that your grandma?" she asked. Paulina nodded. "Yes." She looked smart. She was. The girl reached out her hand but paused, unsure. Paulina nodded gently. "Go ahead." She placed her hand on the glass, not the stool, her fingertips pressing lightly against the barrier. "She looks like me," the girl whispered. Paulina felt something catch in her throat. "She looks like all of us," she said. Outside, the sky glowed with the last golden light of day. The courtyard filled with laughter and music, drums, jazz, voices. Someone was dancing barefoot on the pavement. Another group formed a circle around a spoken-word poet who was shaking the earth with truth. Inside the institute, children ran from exhibit to exhibit, sketchbooks in hand. Elders told stories that spilled into the halls. Artists spoke their truths to strangers who stayed to listen. And in the center of it all, Paulina stood, no longer outside the gate, no longer fighting to be seen. And she was home, and the doors would never close again.